Today's show is brought to you by daviesgirlsphotography.com. Check them out or reach out via email. We have all thankfully moved on from the days of Sears and J.C. Penney portraits, or at least I hope you have. How many of us remember those soft focus glam shots or the awkward family photos mom insisted on taking? Times have changed, thankfully. So if you have an idea or a vision for your first or even 10th photo shoot, Davies Girls Photography can help bring your idea to print. To discuss your next idea, check them out at daviesgirls.com or on Instagram at Davies Girls Photography. I'm Tommy Canale, and welcome to Before the Lights podcast, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Please go to our website, beforethelightspod.com, and follow us on Instagram at beforethelightspod. Please subscribe to the show and share it. Go get a coffee or grab a drink. Tell your family, friends, neighbors, and yes, strangers. It's time to have an in-depth conversation with our guest. If you have not heard of my guest today, then you are not one of her 43,000 plus followers on Instagram. She is an entrepreneur, the founder and creative director of Ashley Michaelsen PR, marketing, branding, media agency, and fashion showroom located in Hollywood, California. She is a fashion expert, actress, model, and appears from time to time on HSN, the lovely and beautiful Ashley Michaelsen. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Hi, that was a great intro. Wow, I didn't even know I did all of that.
I think you probably did if you just kind of rewind time. You've done a lot in your life, and you still have a lot left to go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on the show. And let's start here. You were born into modeling and the acting world. Take me through as a child. How was that? You were in commercials at 6 months old, and what kind of commercials were they?
Yeah. So I grew up in Rochester, New York, upstate New York, and my parents were models. My brothers were models. I was the youngest and the only girl, and it was kind of inevitable that I was going to kind of be born into the industry as well. So I literally started working at 6 months old, doing Fisher-Price and Kodak commercials. My parents were like the official Kodak family because that's where their headquarters were based. And so, yeah, I really didn't know anything else besides modeling, even at that age.
Do you feel like when you grew up in a small town, you said in Rochester, New York, that was an advantage for you, or was that a disadvantage?
I think it was an advantage, to be honest. One, because I love small towns and I love being able to have those humble roots, but it also gave me the determination to get out of the small town because I knew that I didn't have all the opportunities there. So it really kind of became that fire of, although I loved my small town and I appreciated it, I knew it just didn't have what I needed. I needed more opportunities. But then I also think in retrospect, when you start to kind of feel a little bit of your success after years of time working at it, you really have that perspective now of where you came from versus where you are now. And so, it makes it so you don't get caught up in, the extra stuff that you can get caught up in an industry or entertainment industry anyway. So it kind of just really keeps you grounded. Let's
talk about going forward from there and working our way to where you are now. You have 25 years in the fashion and entertainment industry, but let's go back even before that. Let's go to high school and share with my listeners about how your grades were in high school and how that had an impact on you even starting your career.
Oh, they sucked. My grades sucked. I'll be honest, I was a terrible student, but what I mean by that is, unfortunately, I am not book smart, and I have to study 3 times as hard as the average student to even get a 70. And so that was very discouraging because I also know that I have a lot of common sense and self-awareness and emotional intelligence, but that's not really a term that's that was used at that time, right? It's just about passing and getting good grades. So I feel like having those bad grades definitely had an impact on me. And honestly, like I'll admit, I even think that there was like a little bit of a learning disability there, because I was able to take extra time on my exams and actually go into a separate room to take them if I needed to. And that creates your peers to start kind of, now they're aware that, you have a little bit of a disability, because like you walk into the classroom and they'll say, before your exam, anyone who wants to leave can. That is a part of this, program that needs extra help. And so I would always hate having to get up and do that, because it was just kind of putting a target on me of, people kind of making fun of me for that. And also, people never really kind of accepted the fact that I was a model. Like at such a young age in a small town, even if I didn't say anything, there was like, newspapers that would write up about it, or my, parents would talk to people. And so, people were aware that I was a model as well, but I would never talk about it. So it made it even more awkward, because it's like, this girl calls herself a model, but she never talks about it. And then also, like, I didn't have good grades. Plus, I was a very creative person. So I always wanted to, dress up a little bit more. And in a small town, the average outfit is jeans and a t-shirt. And so I would always kind of put a target on myself by dressing up a little bit more. So I had those three things against me, which really, really affected like my high school in general, but especially my grades.
Definitely sounds like you had a learning disability for sure. And that would be labeled as something, at least today's world, it would be for sure. And it's,
right.
And not everybody can be a good book smart student. I mean, you said you studied hard, 3 times as hard just to get a 70, which is the middle of the road. I mean, and sometimes that's as good as somebody can do in the classroom, but you have additional skills that have helped you become where you're at today and be successful. So yes, books and grades are important for school, but there's also another part of learning that you can always use in your career as you go forward. And you've learned to tap into that. Where did you realize that, okay, I have this extra way of learning and it's not just all about books?
Well, it's funny because when you realize you can't rely on your one skill, which is book smart, then you really fine tune all the other, characteristics and skills that you have. And so, I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur, but I don't really think I necessarily like came home and was, really understanding that he was an entrepreneur. Like I was too young. I think it was more or less my mom would take me to New York City every summer since I was like, I don't know, maybe 5 years old, all the way until I was 18. And every summer, when school was out, I would go to New York City. And I mean, that's when you really start learning, because you really learn street smarts and how to really make your own money. I mean, even being a model is kind of the same business plan or, business steps that you take for any business, because at the end of the day, you have to be aggressive, determined, motivated. You have to follow up. You have to be super aggressive. You deal with competition. And so I think just, being younger, I would follow what my mom would say. And then eventually, like, I got old enough to make my own calls and, go to my own auditions and castings. And it just really was that life practice that I got to really experience at a younger age that I think really, really helped me tap into that emotional intelligence and being self-aware, and really learned how to kind of just fine-tune that.
You applied twice to the NYC Fashion Institute of Technology, also known as FIT. Didn't get in. Did you, at that point in time, think maybe I should consider another field, or were you just hell-bent going, this is exactly what I want to do?
No, I never, I really don't believe in giving up. I think you only give up when you exhaust every single outlet and route that you can take. And that's the approach that I've always taken. So, I applied from high school to FIT, and it was like, to me, it was like the only thing that was going to get me out of that town. It's the only thing where I could then maybe like be myself creatively, fashion, and then also really pursue modeling. And so that school was kind of like, it meant everything to me, because it meant more than just an education. And so it was really disappointing when I didn't get in, but I wasn't surprised because my grades were so bad, and kind of from being bullied, I, really was putting more concentration on, all of that versus my grades. But I knew, my backup was like, okay, well, I can go to a community college, I can get my grades up, and then I can apply again. And so I gave myself a goal, and I was like, you will go to a community college for 1 year, you will work your ass off, you will get your grades up, you will do anything to get them up, and then you will apply again, and you will get in. And that's what happened.
So you go to community college, you're full time. And then while you were doing that, you held down not one, not two, 3 jobs.
Yeah.
So 3 jobs while taking full-time credit hours.
Yeah.
How did you balance all that? And what were these jobs? How many hours were they taking up out of your time?
Yeah. I've always been that type of person. I can't just do like one thing. And to me, like every choice I make, it really has an intention behind it. There's a motive behind it. So I don't even know how I had the 3 jobs, but the strategy behind them were, one was working for Abercrombie and Fitch. And so for me, that was like, I kind of want to be around the cool people, but also that was my way of being involved in fashion, right? Even if it was retail, I was like, okay, there's some experience there because FIT is going to ask me if I have any fashion experience. So for me, the motive there was that's how I get into the fashion world. And then I also worked at a dry cleaners, and the motive behind that was a girlfriend of mine worked there, and she had told me that there's only like 2 or 3 customers that come in the whole day. And so she's like, I just do my homework. I'm like, so basically you get paid to do your homework. And I was like, I want a job here.
Absolutely.
So then I got a job there. Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, okay, so I'll be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And that's always my biggest thing. Like, how can you, kill 2 birds with 1 stone or 3 birds with 1 stone? That's always kind of my mindset. And I guess it's just been like embedded in me. And so, and also she was smarter than me. So I was like, okay, then she can probably teach me and help me with my homework. And then the other one was working at the community college bookstore. And the motive for that was it was 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. every morning. And I am not a morning person. I wish I was, but I know that if I don't have a reason to get up, I'm not like that now, but in my college days, if I didn't have a reason to get up, I wouldn't. So for me, like working at that bookstore was a reason for me to get up every morning so then I could make the most out of the day.
So you're holding down 3 jobs, full-time at community college. You're a former pageant competitor. You were a finalist in both the Miss New York pageant and Miss Teen New York pageant.
Yeah.
You're trying to get back into FIT, and that's the whole goal while you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
So did you refer back to modeling at that point in time, going, okay, I can use modeling as maybe another way to get myself in the door?
Well, at community college, I wasn't in an industry where there was really any modeling to be done. So it wasn't until I did get into FIT, and that's when really my 3 jobs then turned into one, which was modeling and then going to FIT full time and then working for a designer.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
If you would, walk us through how you met your first fashion designer.
Oh, all right.
This gets good.
Yeah, this is a good story. I'll try to make it short. So I was actually leaving a place from a casting for modeling, and then I met a designer in an elevator and kind of just small talk. And he said, would I ever be interested in being a showroom model? And I said, yeah, but I'm a little too short for that because traditionally showroom models are, tall, and they're like, size 2 to 4 or 6, depending on the samples that they're trying to create. And I just said, sure. And, I didn't really ask any questions. And then I went into his showroom and realized, I could really learn everything from beginning to end, because on one side of his office was the creative side where you can sketch and you see the fabrics and, you see all the like patterns and things like that. And then on the other side was the manufacturing side. So you could actually see it come together, and the seamstresses were there and the pattern making tables and all of that. And so even though I'm just sitting there and I'm like the showroom model, I literally was there. My motive was to really pick up on everything that was going on, because going back to FIT, I didn't get into the fashion design program. I got into the fashion merchandising program, but I always really wanted to be a designer. So again, I'm like, all right, how can I do this? Now I got into FIT, but I didn't get into the program I wanted to. So this designer was really, more education to me. So I kind of just kept my mouth shut and was like just the model, but my eye was always open in terms of like learning exactly what he was doing. And really I would sit there and I would like take notes down and save them for later and then like go home and look them up and like see what they meant. But yeah, it was, he wasn't the nicest designer. It was very, very, very difficult to work with him, but I was learning so much that I didn't want to leave.
So you're in a job basically that you're not liking at all, but you're sticking it out to learn, to educate yourself and to take what you're learning to move forward. How difficult was that to stay in that job when you didn't like it? Because you hear people all the time going, I'm in my job, I hate my job, I don't want to be in my job. But you had one of those jobs and found a way to fight through that. I mean, what was was it just every day going, I can learn, so I'm motivated to go back?
Well, if you have an end goal and you really know where you want to end up, you can really get through like the present day. But if you don't have an end goal, then it's like, what is the point, right? So I wasn't doing it for money. If I was doing it for money, I would work somewhere else or I would get more modeling jobs. But to me, I looked at it at a different perspective of like, he's paying me to learn. You know, the same way I was looking at like when I worked at the dry cleaners, like I'm getting paid to do my homework. And so I've always looked for those like unique scenarios, again, to kill two birds with one stone. So I had a goal and I knew what I wanted to do. And so, you know, it got to a point where there was only like, there was a lot of verbal harassment and, you know, just a lot of ugly, nasty things that would happen. And it did get to a point where I did leave because it wasn't worth like my mental mindset anymore. And definitely was going home and crying and it was getting more and more difficult. You know, to the point where then I couldn't focus on the end goal anymore. Right. So that's when I'm like, okay, something's got to change. And I think at that point I was a little naive and had thought that I kind of learned everything I needed to learn. So I was 18 and I quit and I started my first line by myself, and took out of some of my savings and just threw it in there. But I really didn't know what I was doing. I just was like so excited to like be doing it on my own and, you know, not be with that designer anymore. And so that first line of, you know, 5 or 6 samples, completely didn't, you know, nothing really came out of them. You know, I wrote a blog about this recently, and throughout the process of, you know, making these samples, I never thought in my 18-year-old brain, how am I going to reproduce them if someone wants to buy them? You know, like, I mean, that's how far off I was. And so when it came to like, oh, how do I buy them? I'm like, oh, I'll just go back to the fabric store and buy more. Well, newsflash, you go back to the fabric store and the fabric's gone. So you can't reproduce it. So I'm like, shit. I'm like, I didn't even think about that. I was so just like excited about, you know, doing it. I didn't think about the steps from beginning to end. And so it was a couple, I think, months later where I was like, all right, now what do I do? Because I don't want to quit and I don't want to keep going. Clearly I don't have enough education. I can't get it from FIT. I could find another designer, but I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get that type of opportunity again. And so I went back to him, completely like swallowed my pride and everything. And I asked him, I was like, is there a way I can come back and work for you again?
Okay.
And
hold on. Let me stop you there before we get there. I want to back you up on a couple things. All right, Ashley, you're 18. You take money out of your savings. You got your first line. And all of a sudden you realize, okay, I don't know everything I need to know.
Yeah.
But I also understand. Tell me, how did you do these patterns when you can't sketch?
I worked, how did I make them? At that time, actually, one of the seamstresses and pattern makers that were working with this designer started to help me on the side. Gotcha. So what I would do is I would go through magazines and I would circle things that I liked, and then I would go to the fabric stores and I basically would show the pattern maker and the seamstress. I'd be like, okay, here's the picture I like, but, you know, can we make the dress shorter? Can we add a bow on it? And then here's the fabric. I would like, just put it together. You know, and so they kind of helped me through that process. But the truth is, you don't really need to know how to sketch, but you do need to understand how to communicate, you know, your thoughts and your ideas. So I've always been a good communicator, but I definitely did not have that skill. So again, it was something I was just trying to overcome, always looking for another way to, you know, get over the struggle.
And before you made the call back to the designer to get your job back, didn't you try to, or you made it important to do an NYC show, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did. Yeah.
And there were some positives that came out of that. What did you take out of that NYC show?
Yeah, I didn't, that show got brought to me right when I was like, oh, shit, I don't know enough about this business. I'm just going to kind of throw in the towel, I guess. And a friend of mine had asked me if I wanted to, show my 5 samples in a fashion show. And I was like, yeah, I guess. I don't really know why, though, because, at that point, I was kind of confused. Like, am I going to keep doing this or am I not? And the show was great. I mean, that's when I started to really learn, I guess, the business side of it, or the marketing side of fashion design. So that's when I got the opportunity of, casting the models and understanding hair and makeup and, hiring a DJ and what type of music and vibe and mood do you want, and, who attends these type of events and how do you get in touch with them afterwards. So there definitely was a great learning curve there as well, because it was me starting to understand a little bit of the business side, but really like the marketing side of it, like what comes after you make those designs.
You decide to call the designer back. Talk to me about what went through your mind before you're going to make the call. I mean, you make the decision, you got to make the call back. I mean, how did you feel about making that call?
Oh, God. I was like, I'm a tourist, so I'm a very stubborn person. And that is like the worst thing you could ask a tourist to do. And I did not want to, but again, it was that end goal that I was like, if this is just one chapter and one challenge that I have to do to get to the end goal, then swallow your pride and do it.
Did you feel like you were making a step backwards, or did you feel like you needed this to go forward then?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely felt like it was a step backwards, but I didn't really have any other option, so it was really like, okay, maybe one step back will be that 3 steps forward. And, how I had that mindset at that age, I really don't know. But I just was so laser focused that the only thing that was going to hurt was, I just had to like put in perspective and be prepared that it wasn't going to be an easy situation. So again, just keep my head down, go in there, get the education I need, and get out. Don't be worried about, all the other drama that came along with being in that job, to just like stay focused. And I'm very good at putting up those borders and those boundaries with people. I think that's something I learned in high school, kind of like being bullied a little bit. I've learned how to kind of work around those things and not let people get to me, and kind of having a tough skin, even with modeling, really teaches you that. So a lot of my upbringing kind of was tested in that moment, and how I was going to overcome that.
How did the call go? Did he take you back?
No.
No, he didn't. So,
no, he didn't.
So how did you get back then?
Well, at that point, his company was suffering. And I think his, the way he treated his employees, I think everybody was kind of getting a little fed up. So when I had made that call to go back at that point, his wife, who was kind of like the lifeline of the company, had divorced him, and a lot of the seamstresses were gone, except for the 2 that were still helping me on the side. And so he didn't have a position for me. He's like, I don't have any money. I don't have anything for you at this point. Like, I'm kind of working month to month right now and struggling myself.
So then how'd you get in?
So then I asked him, how much money does he need to pay his rent? And he told me the amount, and I went back to my savings and I said, I can pay you this much for the next 3 months, and you need to teach me everything you know. And that was the deal. So
wait a minute. You paid his rent for 3 months for him to teach you.
Yep.
This is a movie. This should be in a movie, because normally it's guys paying girls' rents. It's not a woman paying a guy's rent. So, this definitely needs to be in a movie. So you pay his rent, he takes you back, and then where did you come up with extra money to go from there to be able to learn and be able to have money for fabrics and pattern makers and all this other stuff?
Well, I had savings from all my modeling money.
Okay.
So the truth is, like, my expenses at that time living in New York, surprisingly, were very low. I lived in the Bronx, and I had 2 roommates, and I didn't really have a lot of bills. And so any modeling job I got, which I continued to model throughout this whole process, I would put in a savings account. And I also had my modeling money from when I was like 6 weeks old. Like my mom had saved all of that for me in an account. So, I mean, I had to beg my parents because that was like either my wedding money or my house money or, you know, emergency money. I mean, it wasn't necessarily to start a business when you're 18. You know, maybe when I'm a little older, that's something I would have tapped into. But I had to beg them if I could take the money out. And I guess they said yes, or maybe I did it anyways. I don't remember. And yeah, I mean, that's basically where I got the money from. And I asked him, you know, in addition to like teaching me, I wanted him to do a line with me, you know, so I wanted from beginning to end, like we were kind of working on my line together, but it was very clear that it was, you know, like under my name and like I would be paying for all of the expenses that went into it. So the fabric, seamstress, pattern maker, and the money I was paying him just to kind of, you know, be there and walk me through the process.
Did you learn more than when you went back? And either way, was it worth it in the long run to go back?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
It definitely was worth it. I had realized how much I did not know. And, you know, he definitely filled in the blanks for the things that I wasn't aware of and, you know, learned more on the business side and learned about, you know, cost, wholesale, retail, and, you know, prices and, you know, little tricks and trades of the industry and things like that. So it definitely was very much worth it. So I think I went from, you know, my first samples, there was like 4 or 5 of them. And then this time, I believe it was like a 12-piece collection that he did with me.
And how long did you stay there the second time?
I believe it was 2 or 3 months.
And you just decided you've learned enough again and you're back on your own. How did that split happen?
Well, the you know, the arguments between him and I kind of kept getting worse and worse because I was now having a difficult time, you know, staying quiet. I usually always just took the approach of, you know, keep my head down and just, you know, get what you can out of this. But it became, you know, so discouraging and so upsetting that I couldn't handle all the disrespect. And at one point he had said something along the lines of like, if you ever leave here, you can't take your samples with you. And I was like, okay. So clearly there was a disconnect here, or, you know, at that point I was like, okay, I need to do something because if I don't have these samples, then this isn't worth it. Then none of this would have been worth it, right? Because I'd be in a position where I can't reproduce them if I don't have them.
Correct.
So I was like, I'm not going to let that happen again. And so I think I had said, well, these are my samples. I paid for them. You know, I paid you. I don't understand. And then he's like, no, you can't take them. Long story short, I ended up like finagling a situation where the seamstresses and the pattern makers kind of helped me like take my samples and leave one day with all of them in my hand. And, you know, he called me and basically was like, I'm going to call the cops if you don't return them. I'm going to press charges. And I was like, well, I'm going to press charges. I didn't even know what pressing charges meant at that age. I was like, I'll do it too. And what I realized, another big mistake, is if he had pressed charges on me, there was no proof that I had paid for anything because I paid him in cash.
Oh.
So there was no thread or like a check leaving from my account into his that proved that, you know, I paid him for anything and that was the deal. So all I had was like, you know, a bunch of samples, but like, you know, they were in his place. Some of the resources of his I used, you know, sometimes we would kind of take some of his patterns and tweak them, but we would make a brand new one for me, but it would be based off the foundation of his, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And so, you know, after that happened, I grabbed the samples and patterns, and then once I found out that I had no way of proving that I had paid for them, we made a deal, and the deal was that I could keep the samples and he could keep the patterns. And basically, the patterns can remake the samples and the samples can remake the patterns, but it would mean having to do 50% of the work all over again. But I took the deal and had my samples.
From where you're at now, one piece of advice you'd give back to your younger self, looking back on everything we just discussed?
Um, I would say, like, I can be a very impatient person, and I like to see, the fruit very quickly in the process of something. And when you do that, you skip a lot of steps and you make a lot of mistakes. And so I would honestly tell myself that I should have had more patience and I should have really just not jumped the gun so quickly. I was so eager and so excited and so motivated and determined. And I appreciate those qualities about myself, but that comes with a disadvantage as well, because when you're on this like high speed trying to get something done, you tend to overlook some very important steps.
You have your debut clothing line at 21 years old. Talk to me, Ashley, about going from having that debut clothing line at 21 to today being an entrepreneur in a PR, of marketing, branding, media agency, fashion showroom. How did you take that and you just continue to climb the ladder of success and you basically just keep going?
Yeah. But I think at this point, I did launch that line at 21, but then there was another one I launched in LA. So I had made the jump from New York City to Los Angeles. And at that point, I was still modeling full time, and I was also traveling a lot in LA with a lot of companies that I would travel every weekend and during the week, and then I would come home and I would try to continue to design. And I was taking the next steps and taking them very serious as a fashion designer, like being in a PR showroom, being in a style showroom, going to the trade shows. It was a whole other different level, and I was getting some PR for myself. And then a lot of my modeling clients were kind of asking me, so how do you, what is this whole like Facebook and Instagram thing? Because social media wasn't, it was relevant, but not like it is today. And, the bloggers were just now coming up on the scene and, getting press placements and being on celebrity. So basically, like, my modeling clients were now asking me questions about like how I got these opportunities for my clothing line.
The light bulb went on.
Yeah. And the interesting thing was, although it looked so great, like from the outside, it was a lot of work and it was exhausting, and I still wasn't making any money from the fashion line. I was still doing, the next step. And I was doing fashion shows also. I did New York Fashion Week and LA Fashion Week, so it all looked good from the outside. But the truth was, I was exhausted and I was like at my last penny. And I had a turning point of like, okay, I'm going to either continue this for another year, because a lot of my agreements with like my sales reps and my PR reps were ending. And so I had to make a decision if I wanted to continue or not. And as I had to make that decision, I was getting other people coming to me asking me questions, like I said, about, styling or social media or bloggers. And so I started to kind of service them on the side, where I would just kind of be their social media coordinator, or I would style something on the side, or I would, gift some of their product to bloggers and kind of manage that whole, blogger program. And then I realized that it wasn't the fact that I wanted to have a clothing line. It was the fact that I really just wanted a product to promote and market, and it didn't have to be my own, because that was the part that I was so excited about. Like, the reason I was like doing this so fast and pushing it so forward is because I was so eager for the finished product that I really didn't enjoy the process of like designing all the way through. And so when I realized that, I was like, well, I don't even think I want a clothing line. I would be more happy marketing other people's lines. And so that's how it merged into having a marketing agency.
Sometimes when you're getting ready to stop something, the breakthrough is right around the corner. And you talked about down to my last penny, and then you find a way to get around the corner, which you've done successfully. Things have now kind of fallen in place, so to speak, on how it's kind of happened and developed for you. And now you have all this PR. And talk to my listeners about what your fashion showroom is like and what that does.
Yeah. So one of my modeling jobs when I was younger that really was a main source of my income was me being a shoe model. And that's a very niche industry within the modeling industry. And it's basically like if you're a size 6 model, you go in and you kind of do all the meetings with that brand during the buying season. So, if Macy's and Nordstrom's or Bloomingdale's want to come in and have a meeting, they want to see the shoe on a foot before they buy into it. And so I would be that model that would kind of show what the shoe looks like and kind of model it around. So it's kind of the same thing I was doing for that designer, except it was clothes. Now I was doing it for shoes. And I started working for multiple companies, shoe modeling. And eventually a lot of those shoe clients that were my modeling clients turned into my marketing PR clients. And so I decided to kind of specialize in footwear. We do other genres as well, but now I have a fashion showroom in Los Angeles and I represent footwear brands. And then I do everything from, creative directing their campaigns to managing their social media to getting it on celebrities, bloggers, influencers, red carpets. And yeah, I mean, like I said, we do other genres too, but it was interesting because there's nobody in Los Angeles that was focusing just on footwear. So again, I found like a white space and then I just attacked it. And I was like, it's ironic because all the relationships I have happen to be footwear brands. And this ends up being a niche that needed to be, it was a void that needed to be filled.
How do you find the time to do all of that in one day or 1 week? I mean, you have so much going, and there's another aspect. We're going to talk about Smart Gal 101 here in a second, but how do you find the time to do everything you just talked about and get it done? I mean, what's the challenge of that?
Honestly, I would say when you streamline your processes and like your platforms and all the programs that we have to work on, like there isn't enough time in the day to do everything. But if you literally spend 1 week just kind of setting yourself up where you're teed up for everything, then it's kind of just copy and paste the rest of the week, So not to say I don't have any really like luxury time, but I put a lot of time in building a very solid foundation. So I'm not constantly looking for like, oh, what is the password? What is the login for that? Like, how do I get in there? Oh, I lost that. I forgot that. Everything is just set up so it really can just be like a streamlined process for me. And that saves so much time. Like I could talk about hours just on that subject because between that and time managing yourself, you are capable of really getting through like a very, time consuming career or day. It just really comes down to you and how you manage it all.
100% time management and organizational skills are key to anybody who wants to get into business or be an entrepreneur. If you don't have those two things, things can go south quickly. You have to have those. What does Smart Gal 101 do to help those, not wanting to go down the same road as basically you did?
Yeah. So, I mean, shifting into like my new passion project, still doing my PR and marketing 100%, but that sometimes that's only so rewarding. Obviously, it pays the bills and it's great, and I'm self-employed and can make my own hours. But I didn't really feel like I was giving back, or I was really feeling like I don't know. There wasn't much reward in it sometimes, and so what I love talking about is business, and it could be any genre. But I absolutely love talking about business and being an entrepreneur and the struggles and the grassroots approach and all of that. And I created a platform called Smart Gal 101, and it's, a community full of smart gals that are a younger demographic, like 18 to 23 is what I really focus on. And so it's in the development process right now. And so we'll be rolling out a free class and then also online classes as well that, you'll be able to pay for at a very, very affordable price. And it's basically me throwing in everything we just talked about, but in detail and how to not make the same mistakes I did. And really the qualities people need is, going back to the beginning of our conversation, is you don't need that education. If you have these other characteristics and things that you can provide, such as that organization, that time management, that emotional intelligence, being self-aware, knowing how to speak to people and present yourself, that is so much more, can create so much more success than just a degree. And I have a degree, so I appreciate people who do, but I really want to shine light on the fact that if you don't, there are so many other skills that you just have to learn how to tap into.
Absolutely. It's located at smartgal101.com, and there'll be a link in the show notes on the website to get in touch with that website and more about Ashley. Ashley, what is the biggest thing you can give to the listeners, wrapping up what you do as a whole? What kind of advice can you give to them going, hey, all this is possible. How do you make it work? Attitude?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perspective, it's attitude, but it's also, I know it sounds so cliche and I hate to say it, but if you are actually enjoying what you're doing, that makes it so much easier. But if you truly ask yourself, what are the three things I'm really passionate about and how do I monetize that? And really dissect it step for step. Like an example, when I was shifting from designing to marketing, I was doing all these side jobs, right? I was like a stylist one day and I was a designer another day and a model another day. And I was like, who am I? Like, I'm all over the place, right? And I hated when people asked me, what do you do? Because I felt like a cliche of like, well, let me roll out the 25 things I do. And so what I did was I took all of those passions that I had and I put them under my agency and just called them services. So instead of saying one day I'm a stylist and one day I'm a model, I just made it a service.
It's a great idea.
And either I would educate someone on that service or I would actually, execute that service. So I would say people that are out there, if there's multiple things that you enjoy doing and you don't know which one to go after, start with one, fine tune it, start with the other, and do the same thing. Open up an agency and call it services. Like, what are you good at? And how can you provide that value to people? And it really is kind of that easy. Like, what do you enjoy? And can you educate someone on that? And you don't have to do a million services like myself. Like, do what works for you and at the capacity that you can do it. But yeah, you need to have those boundaries with people. Like, when you start to have your own business, people don't realize, I treat my company like it's a 9 to 5. Even though I can work when I want, I traditionally will not take any like personal calls, because if I was at a regular job, you wouldn't be able to do that. And so you have to create those own boundaries for yourself, because there is enough time to do that. And also, you'll get to a point where you can delegate and hire employees and assistants and things like that. But in the beginning, you just have to buckle down, and you really just have to like, what is the end goal? And just keep your eye on that the entire time and don't lose sight of it.
I use something, Ashley, you told me once. We were talking and I had brought up something that I was thinking about doing, and you said, just say yes. It'll all work out.
Yeah, it was probably just say yes and then figure it out. So
yeah, that's it.
The resources now, just say yes and then go back home and be like, shit, now how do I do this?
Right, exactly. I still remember that to this day, because every once in a while somebody will say something, I'll be like, do I do that? And then Ashley goes, just say yes. It'll all work out. We'll figure it out. So
exactly.
Ashley, where are you at today with everything going on in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I definitely want to, I feel for everybody that's affected by this, whether it's their health or their career, or, the moms and dads that, have to take care of their kids and they don't, have a school to go to anymore. I mean, it's really, really, really tough times, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. But I think, again, it's your perspective. It's, how do you be realistic and practical with what's going on, but still, again, not lose sight of your goals. And, health is most important. So if you're healthy and you're able to remain healthy and still focus on your goals, like, do that. I don't want to sound like ignorant when I'm saying that, but what else are we going to do? We can't just watch the news all day, every day, but we have to be aware of what's going on. We have to take the precautions that's going on, practice the social distancing, but then also like still create that time that's just for you and continue to move on. Like there isn't a challenge. So Smart Gal, I was telling you, like, that's in development. I had a choice of like, do I stop that now? Because I'm going to feel maybe uncomfortable promoting something right now. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to keep pushing forward. And when it feels right to release it and promote it, I will. But there's so much like behind the scenes work that can be done right now. And there's so many other things we can be doing, like just, again, educating ourselves, reading books, meditation, yoga, all of that stuff. Honestly, if you do that and try to have a normal schedule and not really, really get stuck in it, then I feel like we can get through this. And I do honestly feel like when this is over and when this passes, I feel like work for people is going to be 10 times busier. I hope that, and that's what I'm telling myself anyways. But in the meantime, it's that balance and it's that perspective of being practical and knowing what's going on, but then also still focusing on yourself and your family.
That is great advice. You can also find her at ashleymichaelsen.com, and it's MICHAELSEN. And if you didn't write it down and you're driving or somewhere else, you can find it on the show notes on the website beforethelightspod.com. Ashley, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Tommy. I had a great time.
Yes, I did too.
Great. It was like therapy session for me as well.
That's right. We had therapy with each other today.
Right?
Everybody, please go and rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It helps us greatly to grow the show. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Like I said, for show notes, go to the website, beforethelightspod.com, and follow us on Instagram at beforethelightspod. For the Extra 5 section, the Patreon portion, also located on our website. And you can also find out how to get your name shouted out on the show. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights podcast. I'm Tommy Canale. We'll talk to you next time. Stay healthy.